In this episode, Democrats get stunned as Gavin Newsom is caught illegally rigging Latino districts to crush GOP votes. Another Democrat gets indicted for stealing $5 million in FEMA funds, and Democrats get a reality check when CNN reveals that a USAID-funded transformer clinic just shut down because Trump ended USAID. Then Democrats get some bad news as Trump was right all along about the economy with some encouraging numbers for Americans. Now, send your reactions in the chat as we break down these stories, and don't forget to smash the like button. We're going to jump into the very first story. The DOJ just confirmed that Gavin Newsom broke the law by discriminately drawing Latino districts to harm white Republican voters for the 2026 midterms. Let's jump into this story and we'll give our thoughts on it, but most of all, let me know what you think in the chat.
Evidence of that, and I'm not sure what the court based that on. Our lawsuit in California says just that. California used race. They wanted to draw Latino districts, and they said that. This isn't a theory or something. The legislators said that when they're passing this map, that they wanted an additional Latino district. So if that is enough to strike down the Texas map, then this one should get stricken down as well. Although the Texas maps, we do believe, are lawful and constitutional, and we do think that's going to make its way quickly up to the Supreme Court.
Well, that would mean that the California redistricting would probably be legal too.
No, because we actually have evidence that the legislators improperly used race to draw the maps. They said it, and they've said it on record. And we're going to have a court hearing on December 3rd, and we'll get an answer very quickly.
Well, now, it's interesting that Democrats say these things out loud, and when they're called out on what they said and what's on the record, they have a way of twisting the entire narrative to make it look like they are the victims. They're the ones being attacked by the Trump administration. The legal system is being weaponized against them. Now, we're going to hear Gavin Newsom after this, and we're going to hear how he frames the entire engagement with the Trump DOJ and his take on the potential of a pushback on the legality of their redistricting plans.
It's interesting, you know, the Brennan Center for Justice talks a lot about this, and that there are some 98 cases that are being tracked with legal challenges related to gerrymandering. All told, they report 49 cases raised allegations of race discrimination, often including, referring back to the Voting Rights Act, to various other state constitutions, racial gerrymandering. What do you make of that being used so frequently in these lawsuits?
You know, that's the one thing the Supreme Court's looking at, is a provision of the Voting Rights Act that we think sometimes does get abused.
All right. Now, we know that the entire fight about gerrymandering is all about the midterms and all about getting more congressional seats. It has nothing to do with underserved minorities. It has nothing to do with the fact that certain groups don't have good representation. It's all about the midterms. Now, here's Gavin Newsom's take on the entire situation. And as usual, Gavin Newsom is saying a whole lot of nothing, because when you really drill down to the entire thing, you find out that, look, it's really all a ploy to get more congressional seats, to edge out the Republicans from Congress. And the fact that it is being that the issue of race is being used during the gerrymandering process should infuriate everyone, because if race can be used for minorities, those in the majority can equally use race to gerrymander their districts. Okay, so this should not be a factor at all.
By the way, forgive the long-windedness, but I don't know if you saw the Truth Social today that Trump just sent out about our efforts on Prop 50.
I didn't see it.
He just sent out and said it's unconstitutional, Prop 50. It's rigged. And he's initiated criminal investigation.
Well, he did say that it's rigged because the Democrats, the California Democrats, said that they were going to be gerrymandering along racial lines. And that is unconstitutional because the Constitution does say that you are not meant to discriminate based on race. You're not supposed to make decisions based on race. And it is definitely true that this is unconstitutional.
To the Department of Justice, he's already claiming the outcome of Prop 50 is rigged. So this is, I mean, I keep saying it, eyes wide open to what is going on. This is literally the test case. This is a preview of 2026. And so while I'm optimistic and I share your passion in terms of of where we're going to be tonight and tomorrow and shape-shifting the narrative, there are dark clouds on the horizon. And so this is about direction and momentum, but there is no having made it. The real test is 2026.
You know, it's stunning to listen to people who think and speak like Gavin Newsom does. There's so much conviction that they are right. However, the hypocrisy quickly gets unmasked when the shoe is on the other foot. As long as California, which is essentially a blue stronghold, gets their way by gerrymandering the way they like, it's a fair fight. As soon as Texas decides to gerrymander, but not the same way California does, it's rigged. They're planning to rig the elections. And then when California decides to flip it and say, we're going to gerrymander along racial lines. Texas didn't gerrymander along racial lines. California said they would. And once they're called out on it, suddenly they're the victims. In another clear case of someone playing the victim, the Democrat from Florida, Cherfilus-McCormick, that's a mouthful, was just indicted for stealing $5 million in FEMA funds and funneled it into her own campaign. And now she faces up to 53 years in prison. I did a search to find out what Democrats are saying about it. You know how Hakeem Jeffries had nothing to say when we were, watching the video where he was being asked about his colleague who was texting with Jeffrey Epstein during an impeachment hearing, and Epstein was coaching her. Well, he didn't have anything to say, but had lots to say about Republicans. And then the same thing is happening with this case. Democrats have nothing to say. The Democrats are mum because, according to them, she's innocent until proven guilty. We're going to see the report on her story because, first off, she's approached by a member of the press to find out what exactly is going on. And here's how she responds to it.
She was back in the district at this event. We tried again.
I also wanted to ask you about the investigation into your families, but this is also part of her congressional duties. Congresswoman, you're under investigation for the congressional ethics for violation of campaign finances. Congresswoman, this is your district. You have to answer to these people. Congresswoman.
Attorneys for her family's healthcare company aren't answering the I-Team's questions either. And the Department of Emergency Management says they won't comment on ongoing litigation, leaving taxpayers and her constituents wondering what happened to those millions.
So you can see the plastic smile she has on her face. Maybe she can't make a statement because it's an ongoing investigation, but her attorneys should at least be able to say something to kind of frame what's going on with facts, but they're not talking either. Now, here's the news report that covered it. And you're also going to hear the same the same framing.
Tonight, federal prosecutors say South Florida Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick stole millions in FEMA disaster funds and then funneled that money into her own 2021 campaign. A new indictment alleges she, her brother, and several associates routed a $5 million overpayment through multiple accounts using straw donors, personal spending, and even filing a false tax return to hide it. If convicted, Cherfilus-McCormick faces up to 53 years in prison.
Okay, now, this is a clear case of corruption. She's being investigated, and I agree with the Democrats. She's innocent until proven guilty. I agree. However, do Democrats agree whenever the shoe is on the other foot? All right. Now, here is Democrats talking about George Santos. And this is just after he was accused, not convicted of his accusation. Now, we know that eventually he was convicted. And, yes, he went to jail and he paid for his crimes to an extent, and President Trump pardoned him. That's fine. Okay. I know that there are people out there who will be jumping or chomping at the bits to say, well, he was pardoned. Look, what I'm trying to talk about is how Democrats react whenever it's someone on their side and how they react when it's someone from the other side. When it's someone from their side, the person is innocent until proven guilty. When it is a Republican, okay, it's time to hang him before anyone knows the outcome of the proceedings. So let's watch this footage, okay? Now, here's Democrats calling for the expulsion of George Santos before he was even convicted. He had only been accused.
And Becca Balint joined a handful of other congressional Democrats calling for New York Congressman George Santos to be kicked out of Congress. The congressional Democrats announced they are introducing a resolution which would formally expel George Santos from Congress. Santos has already removed himself from any committees, but the group says that isn't enough. They want him gone. The embattled New York Republican is accused of embellishing his resume and also significant historical events.
Now, notice they said accused. He hadn't been convicted yet, just accused.
We have to be able, on some level, to trust our elected officials. And clearly, we as colleagues to George Santos cannot trust anything that he says because he has no track record of being honest.
Once the resolution is introduced, it will be referred to the House Committee on Ethics. In the history of the House, only 5 members have ever been expelled.
All right, so this is the double standard that grinds my gears. I want the same standards applied across the board. I don't like partisanship. I don't like it when the Republicans do it. I don't like it when the Democrats do it. The Democrats seem to do it a whole lot. The Republicans seem to be mealy-mouthed in even defending their own people, even stepping up to say, these people are innocent until proven guilty. The Republicans rolled over and allowed the Democrats to kick George Santos out of Congress. They did. And of course, well, he was convicted, true. But whenever you see the Democrats being accused of these things, they rally, they protect themselves, and they basically show that there's a clear double standard, whenever a Democrat is being accused of wrongdoing and when a Republican is being accused of wrongdoing. All right, let me know in the chat what you think, okay? We're going to be responding to your comments in the chat shortly. We want to go to the next story. All right, now, remember the USAID situation earlier in the year where DOJ was going in and exposing a lot of the programs that USAID was up to. And then Democrats went nuts about it. They said that the funding was to help Americans. That's what they said. We're going to hear them say it because, look, I love the internet. Okay, the internet preserves all of the statements that that have been made, and we can hear them say it again and again, meaning they lied. Okay, because when we, now this is about 9 months down the line. All right, when the whole hullabaloo was taking place and they were claiming that the Republicans are killing people all over the world because USAID funding wasn't allowed to flow. We thought that it meant food relief, healthcare treatment against malaria and very deadly diseases. But when we began to hear about things like transformer clinics all over the world and things that essentially didn't make sense, all right, it became very clear the game plan of the Democrats. There was lots of waste, fraud, and abuse, and so on. Now let's watch this story. This is CNN covering the closure of a trans clinic in South Africa. And they said the quiet part out loud because it's no longer the quiet part. It was all funded by USAID.
Our trans community, they come from different parts of the world.
She's showing us around what was a clinic for trans people in central Johannesburg.
Wow, it was big.
It's big. Then this used to be our pharmacy.
And so this has all gone away.
The clinic was funded by USAID, and it was a lifeline for more than 1,000 transgender people until it was forced to shut down after President Trump closed the aid agency earlier this year.
As soon as Trump was inaugurated, basically as soon as he came back into office,
within like a week, he just decided that he wants nothing to do, more especially with LGBTQI plus people, and more especially, he said transgender community.
Adwa is a trans woman who worked at the clinic. She's also HIV positive and depended on the clinic for care.
Right, so, I mean, this is what they said from the very beginning. The Trump administration said from the very beginning. All these billions were going to programs that made no sense. Coming from Africa, believe me, a trans clinic is not what Africa needs. We need more investment in education, proper education. We need more investment in energy. We need more investment in industrializing our countries. We don't need trans programs in Africa. So let's go back to what the Democrats claimed USAID was doing for the American people. All right. Because whenever we remind ourselves of these things, it prepares us for the next outburst of outrage that Democrats are going to come up with.
Elon Musk, you didn't create USAID. The United States Congress did for the American people. And just like Elon Musk did not create USAID, he doesn't have the power to destroy it. And who's going to stop him? We are. We're going to stop him.
I am exceptionally upset about USAID. I lived in a refugee camp for 4 years as a child surviving civil war. It is the essential programs that USAID provided that kept my family and I fed and safe. It is the resources that so many people around the world rely on. And it is our soft power.
This is a constitutional crisis.
Now you can see that Ilhan Omar said the quiet part out loud. It is our soft power. Essentially, USAID funding was being funneled through the USAID to carry out very shady things all over the world. She said the quiet part out loud without meaning to.
That we are in today. Let's call it what it is. The people get to decide how we defend the United States of America. The people get to decide how their taxpayer money is spent. Elon Musk does not get to decide. President Trump directed his corrupt billionaire friend, Elon Musk, to ransack a critical agency of the U.S. government. Musk and his band of unelected acolytes at DOGE have locked out USAID employees from their offices, improperly accessed highly classified information, purged the agency of its nonpartisan leadership, and thrown the agency into chaos through a concerted campaign of harassment and intimidation of its employees. This is a case at the very worst among us, attacking the very best.
Now, yeah. We've heard all that before. So Democrats tend, just like we covered in the previous story, they have this double standard where whenever it suits them, due process, has to be applied. Whenever it doesn't suit them, there's no need for due process. If you're asking for due process, do you have anything to hide? In this case, an agency is being investigated for waste, fraud, and abuse. Usually, when the FBI raids a business and they want to investigate them on accusations of tax evasion, what do? They lock out the employees of the building, confiscate hard drives and documents in order to carry out forensic investigations on their accounts. That's what happens for private businesses. For government agencies that go through an audit, it's like government agencies don't know how to conduct themselves during an audit because they've never been audited. So whenever they go through the process of being audited, they start throwing out accusations that they're being locked out of their offices. That's how audits essentially and investigations are carried out. Well, there you go with the Democrats carrying out their double standards, rules for everyone else, but not for us. And this was just a reminder that all of the things that were said about the USAID program, all right, was actually true. There was tons of waste, fraud, and abuse. And today we're seeing the ripple effect of all of the things that were being done all over the world that basically were non-essentials. Look, you can feel however you want to feel about the trans issue. It is a non-essential, okay? Food, water, and healthcare from diseases that will kill you, not mental health issues that could potentially cause someone to do themselves harm. Those are like peripherals. The essentials, the triage is the essentials: food, healthcare, life-saving healthcare. There are communities all over the world that require this funding to preserve life. Okay, now let's jump to the next story. We have this report, this financial report coming in that lets us know that Trump was actually correct about the economy and about tariffs. All right, now it's a report on the trade deficits. All right, now the trade deficit has hit a year low of $69.6 billion under President Trump. This is amazing because it was higher and it's dropping. Okay, whenever the numbers start dropping, it shows that the right thing is being done. So let's listen to this financial report.
Trade balance for August, as Andrew pointed out, very many weeks late, comes in at minus $59.6 billion, which means that the balance is a deficit. It's very close to what we were expecting. But when you consider that minus 59 is kind of the new mark to pay attention to, that is the low line of the year. That is the smallest deficit of the year.
All right. So we have that report come out. The deficit is low. The Democrats came out earlier in the year saying that Trump is going to destroy the economy. And now we're seeing that the numbers are easing towards something that is acceptable. Earlier in the year, people said that Trump would not be able to do it. Tariffs were not a tool to be used. Now, tariffs were very tricky. And to be honest, whenever you look at trends, especially in business and in the economy, it's never a straight line trending upwards. There are fluctuations, and sometimes it goes up and then it dips down a little because something changes, and then it shoots up a little, and then it, like, these are trends. But the question is, the trend is upwards. It's not trending downwards; it's trending upwards. And so far, this report about the economy is good for the American people. Now, as we're entering into the festive seasons, it shows that if the economy ends on a high at the end of the year, it spells high possibilities that starting the first quarter of 2026, things will begin to pick up in the job market and manufacturing and everything else that people are asking about. All right, now we're going to jump into the chat, and we're going to respond to your chat. All right, Ken is back in the chat. Concerning the USAID story, he said USAID was also a vehicle for the CIA. Yeah, everyone who was breaking or doing their commentary on the USAID earlier in the year brought up that connection. And to be honest, all you need is two eyes and a brain, and you know that the USAID was also what was used to create slush funds for the intelligence agencies. It was untraceable monies, and it was also reported that monies that were meant to go to certain foreign programs never left Washington, D.C. That was what Elon revealed. Like, these people were terrified about what Elon could potentially find. And we were all waiting for him to begin to investigate defense spending. We were looking forward to that. And I think he was nudged out of the way before he could gain access to the Pentagon, because that would have been epic. All right. $2,000 for a doorknob. Anyone? Okay. So let's jump to the next comment. All right. Now, when I made the statement about what South Africa needs, all right. The comment was, but you are not from South Africa. It's like someone in Venezuela saying what we need in the Americas is XYZ, etc. Well, everyone needs oxygen. Everyone needs food. Africa needs a strong and vibrant educational system that can drive the economy. All right. When you produce people with good heads on their shoulders, with skills, they go into the marketplace and create value. When you create value, you create products. Products sell. Sales, microtransactions add to the economy, and the economy grows. All right. That's the downstream effect of treating some of these important issues. Talking about these other issues, it's important to a few people. The trans community is the minority. They are maybe 1%, in most communities. It is not. Now, someone will hear this and want to frame it as violence. All right. Now, what about what I just said is violence? I'm simply stating the statistics. All right. It is not 50% of the population. It is not even 25% or even 10% or even 5% of the population. It's about 1 to 2% of the population who identify as trans or LGBTQIA, right? Let's be generous, 2%. And so when you earmark billions towards programs that cater to 2% of various populations, and when you go to conservative communities like Africa, it is less, all right? The math doesn't math, and it doesn't add up to all of the things that Africa essentially needs. I said that when Obama tried to bully Nigeria into adopting gay marriage, and he had pushback from Goodluck Jonathan, it was appalling for us to hear that was what he was pushing when we need other things. Okay, this is not what we need. And I do know people who live in South Africa, and they will respond by saying that is not what they need. All right. When was the protest, the USAID protest? That must have been between February and March. I covered this protest in my videos, and it was hilarious. It was sad to watch grown people just throw a tantrum, and but it was also entertaining. It was entertaining. They had protests every day for about 2 weeks. Then it got old, and then they found something new to chomp on, and they left the USAID thing because it wasn't going to change. Trump shut it down and moved it over to Rubio's department. Let's see. Yes, there are universal needs, agreed, but you specifically started with as someone from Africa. Yeah. The needs in Africa. Now, when you live in Africa and you follow the conversations for 20, 30 years, and Nigeria is the big brother of Africa, or at least has been seen as the big brother of Africa for the better part of 50 years. Most African countries aspire to have the wealth and the influence that Nigeria does possess. And if Nigeria struggles with certain things like education and so on, the reason why South Africa almost operated like a first world country was because it was ruled by the white South Africans for a fair bit until Mandela became president, and then the blacks began to run it, and they have progressively run the country into the ground. So essentially, South Africa now is not as strong as it was 30 years ago. Okay, so yes, I speak in generalized terms. Now, Rwanda is doing very well. Rwanda is doing very well. I had a friend who just visited Rwanda. They are doing quite well. But it's a small country. They're managing themselves admirably, but they are doing well for their size and for the size of their economy. So, but let's stay on topic. Do Africans really need billions spent on transgender clinics, or do we need funding pushed into education, making our educational institutions stronger, helping our stock markets thrive and compete internationally? Talk about security. Okay, we've done stories about insecurity in Nigeria. How about security? Whenever you look at these things, the question is, do we really need this? Personally, if you want to go out to do some shopping, sometimes, you don't have infinite resources. You do have to ask yourself the question, do I really need this thing that I'm about to buy? And then you have to tell yourself the honest truth. Saying you don't need it doesn't mean you hate yourself. It simply means that there are priorities. And I don't think that the clinics that were mentioned in this story are a priority. All right. Let me see. More comments. Now, if you're watching, please leave your comments in the chat. Please leave your comment in the chat so that you can participate in this conversation. This isn't a, we have the usual people who jump in the chat and they engage in the chat. Sometimes the stories are compelling enough to generate a lot of conversation, sometimes not. But if you have some thoughts on my commentary or on the story, you're welcome to put your reactions in the chat. I'll read it out. We'll have a dialogue, and then it's not you're not locked out from commenting. Okay. But Africa is the most diverse continent in the world. A Nigerian is far away and very different from South African. It's like someone in Venezuela sharing opinion about the USA. You are correct, but I am also correct that there are basics. There are basics. South Africa used to have constant power supply. Right now, the national grid is so degraded that they now do load shading. They rotate power supply to neighborhoods now. And it's not because they haven't been able to do that, but it's because the infrastructure is so run down because of corruption. Right? When you replace the skilled white people with black people who either don't understand how things work or are not as diligent and conscientious as their predecessors who were white or Indian, it creates these problems. These things need to be fixed. All right, those are the things that need to be fixed. Now, the conversation is important. The conversation is important. There are people who require attention. They require care. They require our compassion. I agree. However, we do need to have triage. What is the most important thing? It doesn't have to be, this thing has to be done, else if you don't do it, you're a bigot. We do need to ask what are the most important things. You don't sacrifice the needs of the 1% in order, and you jeopardize the chances that 99% of the population could have if power, education, the economy were addressed and supported by these funds. All right. Now, I am not even arguing for USAID. I'm saying even if you had a program like USAID running and the projects that the Democrats were mulling about, were things that were constructive and that were useful for the South African people, I would join my voice to say, okay, hold on for just a minute. Why are you trying to stop this program that is saving lives? I would join them to say it, but the evidence presented showed that the projects that were being funded by USAID, especially projects like the one we just covered from CNN, were not helpful. They were essentially projects that the South African people, 99% of the South African people, did not need. If you service the 99%, if the 99% are prosperous enough, the reason, now let me just kind of pull back my arguments. The reason why the United States and Europe, let's just focus on the United States. The United States can have programs that cater to minority groups like the LGBTQ community and the trans community, is that the United States is a wealthy nation. And it is wealth that has been built over 100 years based on a thriving economy, okay, built on a thriving educational infrastructure. It produced the manpower to drive the economy. All right. If the United States had a population that struggled, if 50%, let's even say if 50% of the population couldn't get a mortgage to get a house, they couldn't feed their families, they couldn't get funding to send their kids to school, they struggled with healthcare, basic healthcare. No one would give a damn about trans surgeries. No one, because you can't even afford to buy a house. But but over the years, because the wealth had been built, people felt like the United States had the bandwidth to begin to cater to these other issues. And then these issues were being catered to because of the wealth of the country as a whole. Africa is not that wealthy. South Africa isn't that wealthy. And when I say wealthy, it doesn't mean they don't have the resources. They don't have the intellectual wealth to manage and process their resources. And so they are a poor continent. All right. And I'll speak as an African. We are a poor continent. So trying to bring in, okay, so the trans clinic doesn't get any funding. Now it's shut down, and very soon it will be run down if no funds are pushed in there. All the funds that were pushed in there just sank into a black hole. The right investment would have been sink it into an engine that makes more of itself. That means you put money in there, it generates more money. But that's not what they did. So that was a bad investment in my books. Let me know what you think in the chat. There's one more chat that's in there. All right. Yeah, there's one more chat in there. I'm trying to catch all the chats. Hold on. So there's one chat that didn't make it. I want to read it from the YouTube live chat. It says, but your point is correct. US dollars shouldn't be wasted that way. Yeah. So, you know, in this case, I'm not even going to try to say, you know, do this or don't do this. The issue is, even if you want to do it, even if you have to do it, there has to be some responsibility in how the U.S. taxpayers' money is spent. By the way, I agree that. Okay, my point is Africa is not a monoculture. The one region of Africa isn't the same as another. We're talking about economy. We're talking about economy, not even lifestyle. We're talking about economy. The South African lifestyle is very different from the Nigerian lifestyle. That is why they have rampant HIV cases. Our lifestyles are different. You're correct. You know, you're correct. But then again, I am also correct that there are things that are a net benefit for the whole country, for the majorities. That's really where I'm going. I'm not trying to say that Africa is a monoculture. Africa as a whole is more conservative than the West as a whole. So in many cases, you could speak in line, but okay, South Africa is a different kettle of fish. All right, I concede. Let me not try or attempt to speak for South Africans. Maybe we'll get someone from South Africa to speak to this and say whether this is something important to their culture. So I can't speak to South Africa's needs. So I concede. I will concede the point. All right. No, you can't speak as an African for all Africans. That's absurd. Africa is very diverse. That's like a Venezuelan speaking for a New Yorker. I mean, you're right. You're right. But I hope you can also agree that there are certain fundamentals that everyone needs. Everyone needs to eat. Everyone needs a roof over their heads. Everyone needs the potential of getting an education that will give them a head start in life. I mean, like there are certain things that there's a hierarchy of needs. All right. And when we measure things by the hierarchy of needs, it tends to be similar across the board. And I'm saying needs. All right. Then before we step into wants, everyone in the world doesn't need an iPhone. It's not a need. All right. You have options. If you pick a different brand of mobile device other than an Apple product, your life will not be over. Contrary to some teenagers' beliefs, it will not be over. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to bring up in this conversation. All right. We've veered away from talking about USAID and talking about our perception, but honestly, it's good that we're doing that, because our ability to break down these ideas and come up with very common sense conclusions shows that we are operating at a higher level of civilization. We are not we're not beasts who are directed by our passions and the things that drive us. Like, you know, we are living souls who can think and who can process two things at once and try to reach a balance that would be for the greater good. All right. All right, so we'll be ending the live stream here in the absence of more chatter, unless I see something pop up on my screen. Now, there's usually a delay in the chat. Usually I say something and then it takes about 10, 15, 20 seconds before everyone else sees it. The person who is following the live stream in real time sees the comment that I make. So I try to give some grace to everyone. Now, there's a poll that was made, or that was set up, and I want to give the results of the poll. I want to give the results of the poll. Should any political map be drawn using race as a factor? The result says 100% never. All right. So I think everyone who is well-meaning and has common sense, can agree with that. Gavin Newsom doesn't seem to pander to people with common sense. Kenerikin says, on USAID, we agree. On Africa's vast differences, not so much. No, we agree on the vast differences. We do. All right, since we have extra time, I'll dive deeper. Okay, so go ahead and dive a bit deeper, and let's see what we can see, because essentially we do agree. We do agree essentially. I am speaking on the I'm focusing on what Africa needs. Okay, what we need group-wise. Africa is poor due to exploitation and neocolonialism, but you didn't add corruption. You didn't add corruption. Now, there is also a factor there. You are right about neocolonialism. You're right about exploitation. Maybe corruption from the local leadership can also fall under exploitation, but I would like to define corruption separately so that it's clear that the Africans have a part to play in what's going on even now, years after pure colonialism was happening. All right. Now, I'll be honest with you. I haven't explored the depths of neocolonialism. I have an idea what the implications could be, but I haven't. So I like to hear I like to hear a range of opinions on the issue. South Africa during apartheid had AIDS spread as a biological weapon in certain communities. It was confessed during the hearings. It was. Now, I also want to point out, that the cultural response to the AIDS outbreak also didn't help, because I have heard it reported, perhaps not in mainstream so much, but with people who have lived in South Africa, that the Black population in South Africa at one time, and some of them still do believe it, they believed that the cure to HIV was forcing yourself on a virgin girl. And so that was the point where the statistics of sexual assault skyrocketed in South Africa. Okay, young girls were getting assaulted because the men who were infected believed that if they assaulted a virgin, they would get cured. So that also didn't help. Like, we need to also kind of take a look at the whole thing 360. It's a horrible thing when you see that there are people who are prejudiced against another race, decide to use their God-given ingenuity to create chaos and mayhem and pandemics on the population that they are prejudiced against. Have these things happened? They have. Okay, so we can't pretend like they didn't happen. Were these things exposed? Yes, they were. That was decades ago. What's happening today to educate the Black community under Black leadership. Okay, South Africa is being run by Black leaders now. Under Black leadership, what is being done by the Black leadership to educate the general population of Blacks so that they can understand how to curb the spread of the HIV virus within Black communities? What is being done? Okay, so while there is blame to be had from people who conducted colonialism in the past and did some horrific things, and people who are still promoting neocolonialism in the shady parts of governments all over the world, we should also be able to have the leadership, the Black leadership of the world, take responsibility and say, okay, so all that is in the past. What are you doing today? What are you doing today to protect your people? Corruption is a part of neocolonialism. Yes, corruption is a part of the neocolonialism system. There were conversations that I had with friends in Nigeria where we began to connect the dots, and it just appeared like the Nigerian leaders were kind of standing in proxy for the crown, okay, for the British government. It just felt that way, So you just keep looking at what's going on. You're wondering what on earth is going on with Nigeria. Where is the economy going? Colonialism was replaced by neocolonialism. The Truth and Reconciliation hearings. Those were done, but from what we've heard and seen over the years, those hearings didn't do what they were meant to do. It was all warm and fuzzy for a while. Mandela died, and we had people trying to still carry out revenge for things that happened under apartheid. Canary King says, so to say South Africa is different from Nigeria due to culture, it was due to specialty attacks. I'm not sure about that. Sexual assault is also rampant in Nigeria. That doesn't explain the data. It is not as rampant. Believe me, it is not as rampant. If you only talk about the kidnappings that happen in northern Nigeria, that is only unique to those incidents. Okay. Now, if you're talking about assault that happens as a result of relatives, extended and nuclear, engaging in all kinds of shenanigans with other family members, that is also something that we don't even have the numbers for. Okay, but based on the data and based on the things that people are culturally aware of in Nigeria, it's not really there. Okay, so it's like this. Crime statistics in Nigeria are not reliable. All right. If we have crime statistics available on the internet, multiply it by, say, 100, because the degree of crime and insecurity that Nigerians feel is palpable. All right, it's palpable. It's different from the statistics that people, see online. South Africa was specifically targeted and infected and has a deep reserve of that condition. The United States also has a deep reserve of AIDS. I mean, I'm trying to understand the logic, okay? Because the black South Africans have been in power for 30 years, over 30 years now at this point. If they were really keen on serving their people, isn't 30 years enough time to run a vibrant education campaign against the HIV infections educating people on what to do, getting funding for the retrovirals, training people on how to, deal with relationships that have HIV as a factor in it. These are things that in 30 years could spell a reversal in the condition. But instead of that, we do have these reports of assault as a cure to the condition, and it is rampant in the Black communities. So it is weird to discuss. And for me, not having lived in South Africa, maybe we find someone who lives or has lived in South Africa to discuss this issue, because I would say I am not a reliable source. I don't even want to trust Grok or AI at this point because, like I said, African data is suspect at best. So it's better to just say, here's what we think. I can't defend or push any point at all. I'm just going to read the comments that you have to make. No, it hasn't been fixed. From generation to generation, the condition is spread. Yes, it has not been fixed. Nigeria is designed internationally. I agree. Okay, from the origins of Nigeria becoming amalgamated. Well, it was a good thing when it happened, because if the British hadn't pushed back the advancement of the Fulani under Uthman Danfodio, possibly most of Nigeria could have been conquered by the Fulanis a long time ago. Of course, Nigeria's Black faces are the representatives of the crown. Yep, they are. And could it also be that there are white faces in the United States who are representatives of the crown as well? We saw the USAID contributions to the BBC, and the BBC made a hit job on President Trump. Like, it's funny, but all of these things are connected. It kind of reminds me of back in the day when the royal families of different parts of Europe were all related. You know, they were all distant cousins of this other person. Someone's cousin is married to the Tsar of Russia. Another person's cousin is the same cousin has a relative in Germany. They were all related. It was like this gigantic inbred royal organization to rule the world. All right, they were all related. They married amongst themselves. Second cousin removed. I think it's kind of similar. All right, somehow these tentacles spread. Somehow. Yes, they are just junior agents. All right, so if you're watching, please dive into the chat and let's know what you think about this conversation. Don't feel like an outsider, okay? Let's know what you think. If you think that this conversation makes sense and you have some extra thoughts on the matter, go ahead and throw in your thoughts. And if you enjoy this this live stream, the content you've seen so far, you enjoy the laid-back, calm way we break down the news and have commentary without demonizing anyone. We try not to. Please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing the video, and most importantly, engage in the comment section or in the chat. I love chatting with you. I love responding to your chat. And maybe, Canerican, we can also take a look at the comments, because I think we have some comments that we might enjoy reading. So let's go through this. Nigerians are dynamic people. The Nigerian system, however, is uniquely designed for a certain purpose. That is true. It is true. That is true. No, South Africa can't solve that condition with all the other initiatives they're working on. All right, so are you saying, now I want you to give me an answer. Are you saying that no matter how hard South Africans or Africans try to solve problems like what South Africa has with the HIV system, which was essentially engineered to infect the country's Black population, are you saying that no, if the African leaders decide we're going to take care of this thing, are you saying that the Nigerian leaders are so inept that they won't be able to do it? Or are you saying that because they are vassals of international conspiracies, they will not do it? I just need to know what your point is on that matter. Let me know your thoughts. And jump into the chat. If you're watching and you're kind of fascinated by this exchange, jump into the chat, okay? Jump in the chat, let us know. I mean, you're seeing the chat coming up, all right? If you want to see your name in red over there, all right, on the screen, jump on the chat. All right. Canary King says, those reports of virgins are not a scientific data source, but they are people on the ground. These are people on the ground who have said these things. And like I said, Nigeria, let me speak for Nigeria so that I don't do what I did earlier, trying to cast a blanket statement over the entirety of Africa. In Nigeria, we have a problem with data. And so it's almost impossible to get accurate data on crime and different kinds of statistics. So when you're looking at South Africa and Nigeria, if I were to transpose the Nigerian condition where data isn't handled properly, I would say they're going through the same thing where data is either not accurately reported or not recorded at all. But the people who live in the country talk with people who have gone through this circumstance. All right, so that it is, if you know, the fact that it isn't represented in databases doesn't mean that there aren't real people who have gone through this horror. You know, that's just my thoughts on the matter. Canary King says, we can't just believe any story we hear. And that's why we have to talk to South Africans. Okay. If we were to do a live stream and say, let's do a deep dive and let's find videos about these accounts from South Africa, and we just play these videos, all right, would we say that this is hearsay? All right. Because I think there are videos that detail this situation in South Africa. I would think so. All right. I haven't seen them, but I would think so. The story or the account is so pervasive that it can't just be one or two people spreading a rumor. All right. So I don't want to go looking for a video right now. But if we were to do a live stream focused on investigating this, perhaps in a private members only live stream where we're like, okay, we want to dive down this rabbit hole and see what's going on here and talk about it. All right. That would do very well in the members only segment, not in the generic or general forum. Now, guys, I try to go through all the chats so you can get your comments in while I'm reading through the chats. Excuse me. I haven't drunk any water. Have I been enjoying this live stream so much that I forgot I had to drink water? Okay. Amalgamation wasn't good. The Sokoto Caliphate had run out of steam. They couldn't expand further. They couldn't because they couldn't withstand the firepower of the British. That's what I think. That's what I think. All right. Neither of us were there. But that's what I think. Okay. They couldn't withstand the power of the Gatling gun. Yes, the crown is deeply entrenched in the USA and trying to take over. Yep. Explaining poverty in Africa without examining the neocolonial system is a waste of time. Agreed. Agreed. we also know about the economic hitmen. I think that's what they're called. There are documentaries of these people who carry suitcases into the presidential palaces of South American countries, who work for the CIA and try to get them to not implement certain projects that would make their countries truly wealthy and independent of US hegemony. And then suddenly, if the president is a good guy and refuses, there's a coup. If the president is a bad guy and agrees, their country goes to hell in a handbasket. Like there are all kinds of stories out there. And the more you dive down this rabbit hole of who's really in charge of governments around the world, you become like Alex Jones. You just find a devil behind every rock, behind, hiding in every shadow. Everything that happens in the world has the hands of this many tentacled beast, that is the globalist power or something. So you just suddenly become Alex Jones at that point. Because when you really, if we had a board where we connected the dots, it would be frightening. Just like a few people who joined the live stream a few days ago who didn't even know that Obama was related to the Bushes. Didn't know. And I just said it offhand, expecting that everyone knew that, but people didn't know. So it's kind of, and that's honestly why being able to just think through stories and topics and news stories and have conversations like this is good. It kind of breaks the mold your mind might be in to think further and deeper about things you see going on in the world. How on earth could the US government make certain decisions if they are not being influenced by hidden people behind the scenes? Okay, as much as people talk about the deep state, I don't think they've dug deep enough. I don't think so. I don't think they've dug deep enough, because as it was with Europe, with all of the intermarriages and alliances that were happening with different royal families across Europe, the same thing is happening today. There are alliances, deep alliances, to control how the world is going to turn out. It's not because of poverty, etc. Answer to your question, South Africa has limited resources and can allocate those resources on many initiatives. Not all of the initiatives can be solved in a short term with limited resources. I agree. Every country has limited resources, everyone. But if something is life-threatening to the population and the government decides that this thing is something that needs to be dealt with, I think they can pull it off. I think so. I have faith in the Black community. I don't want to call them a race. I have faith in the Black community. We have very intelligent people. We have very brave people, courageous people who are willing to take on these things. But why haven't we done so? It can't just be chalked up to there's a hidden influence somewhere. I mean, there has to be possibly something else that could be causing it. Sokoto was stopped in Ibadan by the regrouped Oyo forces. Okay, I haven't heard that story before. Anyway, we'll just Abdul Salam, the Sokoto prince, wanted to go to the Atlantic shore but was defeated by the Oyo forces, though they captured a lorry. Yes. It's fascinating to read these stories. It's fascinating to read these stories and to see how the world was essentially reshaped by some of these battles and wars that people don't even talk about. No to Alex Jones. The neocolonial system is extremely straightforward. It's just that Nigerians are not aware. It's a very simple and straightforward system. The majority of Nigerians aren't aware because they are too hungry to think. They're just trying to survive. All right, they're just trying to survive. It's middle class people like like me, who have at least some breathing room to kind of take a breath and ask yourself, how come Nigeria is so screwed? The wealthy people don't care because the more screwed up Nigeria is, the wealthier they get. The middle class people are the ones in the balance, okay? And we think about these things all the time. And it's like, okay, so why is this country screwed? And then you watch a documentary and say, oh, is that why? You watch another one, oh, is that also why? And then you just keep thinking and talking and talking and talking. And eventually you get all talked out, and then you buy a ticket, get a visa for your family and your kids, and you leave the country. And you're like, look, there's nothing that can be done. It's like you just get so black-pilled. Because I told my cousin one time, I said that there are two things that can change Nigeria. And the first thing is an act of God. And those are very few and far between. And you only read about them in the Bible. And occasionally you read about them in real life. But these are things that happen few and far between, where the bad guy dies, somebody who is righteous and godly replaces him, and there's some reform that is essentially bloodless. And it has very heavy spiritual influences. But the second thing that tends to happen most of the time is an act of war, where there's bloodshed, and usually that doesn't end well. And what is left afterwards is relatively worse than what was there before. So I told him, well, I don't subscribe to that. So I guess we're going to keep what we do have in Nigeria. So I was essentially black-pilled as soon as I said that. How do you feel knowing I know Nigerian history better than Nigerians? I don't feel anyhow. Like essentially, most of the deepest history books that have been created or written by Nigeria have been written by people who live outside of Nigeria. Because the people who live in Nigeria don't have the time to do this. Like, they don't have the time to do it. And they struggle to even figure out how to get access to information about the country. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing that people who live in Nigeria don't even know about these things. They don't. But middle class people like you think British saved you from Sokoto, when in fact it wasn't the case. No, it depends on the information that we have access to. For example, I got the information from a source. All right, I got that information from a source, and that source wasn't British. It wasn't. It was also Nigerian. Then you corrected me by saying, here's what happened and here's the battle. And I'm like, huh, interesting. Never heard that before. And I'm like, that sounds plausible. And the only reason why I think this way is that I've seen enough of the world and of history to know that many times the stories aren't exactly the way someone else told me. Maybe there's a combination of factors. Maybe either one of them is telling the truth, or both of them are lying, or both of them are telling the truth. Maybe there was a battle at Oyo State. Maybe there was something else that took place that essentially pushed back the invasion, and the British had a hand in it. Both things can be true at the same time. So if you followed me long enough, you see that I don't, unless I have definitive proof that or I've read something and it's like, this is what I know. For example, if I were to have a conversation around the Bible or scripture, it's if there's something that I've studied extensively and I know the facts, I would not capitulate so easily. I'll be like, okay, here's what the Bible says, here's where the history says it, and so on. And I would not budge because I have become well educated and well versed in that. But in things that I don't know about, I'm very fluid. I operate with an open hand, and I don't get very dogged about such things. I just learn what I can, confirm the knowledge, and then just move on. God is going to save Nigeria, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. God is going to save the world. He's going to save the world. I believe that in saving the world, Nigeria will be saved. I'm looking at how the entire planet is behaving politically, and I know that, man, at this point, it's going to be like a end of the world thing. Like, okay, me, I am a Christian, very devoted Christian, and I believe that there is a time coming in the future when Jesus will appear in physical form, and he will appear to the world, and essentially that will be the end of world governments. All right, everything will be under him. I believe that. So at this point where the whole world is rapidly rushing towards destruction, I'm like, okay, I guess that's where we're going, I guess. But I think my job here is just to kind of do my part. Just do my part, whatever that part entails. History is purposefully hidden in Nigeria by the system. I agree. They stopped teaching history in the middle schools and high schools. They stopped it years ago, which is a betrayal. I believe it's a betrayal. Sokoto ran out of steam. They collaborated with the British because they saw it as an opportunity to spread their reach covertly. Again, plausible. All right. We're at an hour 16 minutes. All right. Connecticut is still going. By the way, the Oyo state today is New Oyo. The original Oyo or Old Oyo was much further north. Yes, it is true. That is true. The map of Nigeria has been redrawn so many times. It's hard to remember, where the original boundaries were. The Benin Empire, the Oyo Empire, and the Sokoto Empire. Like those were essentially the main empires in Nigeria at the time. So it's an amazing and an intriguing look at African history, Nigerian history, and the more you study it, the more you're like, you begin to connect the dots. For example, if we were to do like a retrospective on all these empires, the encounter with the British, and how the British colonies in Nigeria eventually became amalgamated and became Nigeria, and who were the people at the forefront and so on, you just realize Nigeria was actually purchased. It was sold. It was a business concern. Okay, that was the amalgamation. It was a merger. That was what it was. It was a merger, and then they figured out a way to corral the people into this construct. By the way, Oyo State today, yeah, I've already read that. The Battle of Osogbo in the 1840s, if you are interested in the facts, I am interested in the facts. Nigeria is a neocolonial construct, agreed. The Aro Confederation, Nri Kingdom, Opobo. Like, whenever you break down essentially the deconstruction, this live stream has gone into certain arenas. And what I would like to say before I just proceed with this is, part of thinking for yourself is reaching back into history. The title I gave this live stream is Headlines and History. And the original idea is be able to connect what's happening today and look back at what happened earlier, like we did with the Democrats' reaction to USAID when considering the current day or present day effect of USAID funding cuts. Democrats claimed that it was removing funding from American programs, on the mainland, but we're seeing the impact across the globe of the cancellation of these funds from USAID. So we look at what's going on today, and we're able to look back at yesterday to say, okay, here's where it started, and here's where it is. And looking at the history of a country like Nigeria, where I am from, and trying to break down how did Nigeria arrive here. Looking at history tends to educate you and get you caught up on how the country arrived there. Do the same thing for any country on the planet. England, Sweden, the United States, Mexico, like do a connecting dot for all of them, and you'll find out that, look, there's a lot more that happened in the past that controls what's happening today. True history is hidden from Nigerians. Did you know Nigeria has only had one queen? Wasn't that Queen Amina, or was it someone else? But that's Zaria. I don't know if the monarchy of Nigeria. I don't know. Never heard of that. These are conversations that we can have in a kind of closed members only thing, and it can be a panel and just kind of discuss all these things, and then you can bring up your findings. Like, there are tons of things that we don't know, not just about Nigeria, but about the world. About the world. I follow a channel that originally does movie reviews, and the creator of the channel is currently in Egypt. He's also interested in hidden history, things that people teach differently in colleges, but are actually a different reality, you know. All right, so who was the queen of Nigeria? You're yanking my chain now. All right, so if Amina, now I didn't say that she was queen of Nigeria. I said she was Queen Amina of Zaria. I did say of Zaria, but I don't know if that represented Nigeria. The British queen was the queen of Nigeria. Of course, like everyone knows that was the gotcha. I was going to say Queen Elizabeth, you know, but you know, yeah. I don't know. All right. All right. So let's put a pin in it. Let's put a pin in it. All right. If you're watching this after the fact and you followed us down this rabbit hole to discussing Nigerian history and South African history, all right, I appreciate you hanging out. It means that you are a super fan. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't. Consider liking the video and sharing the video if you haven't. And also consider joining us for future live streams, because we would love to have you doing the live stream to engage in the chat like you see us doing here. We live stream every day at noon and at 9 p.m. Eastern. And I do hope that you make out the time to join. Now, I would also like you to consider donating to the channel or becoming a channel member. You can do any of that by using the super chat or super thank feature if you're watching after the fact in the comment section, or you can also join the membership and become a monthly subscriber to our content. There's members only content, and I've already teased that members only live streams where we discuss not just the news but also connected topics like history, like we're doing here today, in a format that is free, open, and also there's the caller. There's a call-in feature which we already have active, where you can join the conversation as a panel member and have a conversation with us during the live stream. Okie dokie. Now, just to wrap up the chat, because I always promise that I complete the chat. Now, the British Queen was the Queen of Nigeria from 1960. Nigeria remains a member of the Commonwealth. And as a member of the Commonwealth, you're still affiliated or beholden to the crown. but it's a very weird dynamic with Nigeria. Since independence, there was this separation. The currency doesn't have traces of the crown. It doesn't have any of that, but still we're members of the Commonwealth. It is confusing. We don't understand it in Nigeria. We don't. And I think that the true connection is found when you become a member of the government. You now begin to see that through line to the crown. How can an independent nation have a colonial queen? When it's just, look, I agree that that is a question that no one will want to answer, and they would do what people who try to lie to you do. They will deflect, and they will try to parry the question to say, what do you mean by that? We're really independent. She was head of the government from 1960 to 1963. And then Nigeria became a republic when, I mean, there's so many things to discuss. So many things to discuss. All right, Connecticut, we have to call it. We have to call it. We've been talking for about 50 minutes now, and it's been great. It's been great. Let's schedule a live stream where we cover stuff like this and just kind of talk about it, and do the connections. It's interesting to kind of connect the dots, and when you start seeing these connections, you essentially snap out of the hypnosis. You're like, okay, I need to see what else I don't know. All right, so let's figure out a live stream when we can do that. Have a kind of conversation panel, show data, show the records, show the historical reports and things like that. I mean, there is potential for that, and I think we can make that happen. All right, yeah. Thanks for hanging out, Connecticut. It's always great. I went over the allotted time, but it was already clear that like the idea essentially is the first part of the live stream is the stories. The second part of the live stream is the engagement, and if the engagement is constant and is driven, then we just keep going. All right, so the live stream essentially doesn't cut off at a certain point unless it is very clear that we just have to. All right, so but we will be more disciplined with our time. We try to keep it at an hour, and we've gone over by about 27 minutes, which is fine. No, look, I agree about this. Okay, Africa can't be generalized, but when I try to make generalizations, I just try to pick out the most common denominators, and those are industry, the economy, education. Just basic common denominators like food, shelter, is the basic, and health is a basic denominator for individual human beings. For nations, there's the economy, industry, and education. Anywho, thank you so much for being a part of this live stream. Let me know your thoughts in the chat, in the comment section, if you're watching after the fact. Also, if you want to send us correspondence or make inquiries, the email address on the screen is available for you to do that. Send an email, send an update. If you have thoughts on the live stream or on any of the videos that you've watched on the channel, you can send them to the email address on the screen. We will be back tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern for the evening belt of the show, where we're going to be covering the news and other things that are developing in the United States particularly. And I hope you will join us then. Thank you so much for being a part of this live stream. And until next time, God bless you, and I'll see you on the next one. Welcome to Headlines and History, live news reactions and your views. We're about to go live soon, so grab your spot and get ready for a sharp, balanced take on today's biggest news stories. with a dash of historical insight. Stay tuned. Each week, we tackle the headlines that matter: politics, economics, global events with a balanced lens. We'll react live, tie today's stories to historical moments, and spotlight your views in the chat. From trade talks echoing the 1990s to crises recalling 2008, we're here to unpack it all. Your voice drives the show. Share your thoughts or historical parallels in the live chat, and we'll dive into the best ones. It's news, context, and community all in 1 hour. We're moments away from launching headlines and history. Stick around for live reactions, historical nuggets, and your chance to chime in. Hit the notification bell, prep your comments, and let's make sense of the news together. See you soon.